You're watching Reality Check. Tonight, the escalating debate over the integrity of economic data. Let's look at this big story. We're going to focus on it tonight. First, over 108 economists as well as social scientists issued an official statement citing multiple instances of interference and even tampering with official data. Amongst the concerns the economists raised were questions over GDP numbers after modifications to the data by the government appeared to show the Modi government in a better light. Also, how an official jobs report, which showed unemployment at a 45-year-old high, was stalled, leading to the resignation of 2 members of the Statistical Commission. This letter was rebutted not by economists but chartered accountants, 131 of them, who said the economists are making politically motivated allegations. The response of the CAs, and I'm summarizing here, is that the allegations are political because, one, they said, the allegations appear choreographed and resemble the previous award wapsi drama, which too was enacted before a crucial state election. Even facts reported by the armed forces are being questioned. 2, the CA said that India has been an economic laggard till 2014, but none of these economists or social scientists spoke up then. 3, that data on GDP, poverty alleviation and so on has been published by international agencies including the World Bank, IMF and many others. And 4, that the concerns raised would unnecessarily affect India's standing in the world, whether it's foreign governments or foreign investors. Arun Jaitley tweeted out a link to a short video in the aftermath of this letter where he also seemed to make similar allegations, calling these economists compulsive contrarians.
A few days ago, 108 so-called economists issued a statement questioning its validity. I analyzed the credential of all 108 and found out that 70% of those are compulsive contrarians, critics of the government, who have signed multiple memorandums against this government in the last 5 years. Most of these memorandums are on the issues of politics and not economy. As against this, credible international institutions like the IMF and the World Bank have always accepted our data.
All right, joining us tonight on the debate, we have with us Dr. Pranab Sen, former chairman, National Statistical Commission, Jayati Ghosh, who's economist at the Center for the Economic Studies and Planning, School of Social Sciences, one of the signatories of that letter sent by the economists. And also with us is Mr. Devraj Reddy, who is the former head of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, joining us from Hyderabad. He was one of those who authored or signed the letter sent out by the Chartered Accountants. Another signatory to the Chartered Accountants letter here in our studio, Anuj Goyal, member of the Chartered Accountants Council. Jayati Ghosh, since we already have a sort of a response to the response, that is, there's been a rebuttal to your letter, let me just start with you and ask you to just respond to the gist of what the Chartered Accountants have alleged, which seems to broadly suggest that you are acting out of some kind of political agenda. Why were you not raising these questions pre-2014?
Well, there are several issues here, in fact, Vasu. The first point is that many of the signatories come from completely different political persuasions. Many of them are apolitical. Many of them have very, very different political leanings.
Right.
And many of us, whom Mr. Jaitley has just called compulsive contrarians,
yes,
have in fact been writing
economists.
letters in the previous government as well. And we
right.
have been criticizing the policies of the previous government. So I don't think there's any particular way in which it could be argued that this is politically motivated. This is a genuine concern because it has never happened in the past few decades that the government has actively suppressed the data produced by its own statistical agencies.
Right.
And this is a really important and serious issue because if you don't have the credibility of your national statistics,
yes.
then you can't actually undertake policy making. Citizens have no basis to judge anything, and we as economists or indeed chartered accountants are not aware of the economic realities that we are supposed to be analyzing.
Okay. So, can I just go across to Devraj Reddy? Mr. Reddy, now, Jayati Ghosh is saying there's nothing political about their intervention. These are people who represent all stripes of political thought, who've criticized governments in the past as well. But let me ask you, because the framing of your own letter actually seems more overtly political than theirs, because you seem to set your benchmark for 2014, which is when the Modi government came to power. Can I just begin by asking you, what was the motivation behind this intervention? Was there any kind of political, I don't know, gesture or compulsion that led you to put this letter out?
So one thing, see, I'm a chartered accountant. Maybe one, we are missing chartered accountant, but we are a responsible citizen of India. We have to see the name, fame first. Then many foreign investments are coming to India. We are forwarded better than China. Now, some people are questioning the basic data the institutes which are giving. See, the institutes are independent. Institutes are giving the information and questioning their data 100% is wrong. As a responsible citizen and having awareness, see, economists, they have separate data. As a chartered accountant, we are also studying everything starting from common different levels and we are regularly reading papers. So we have knowledge. As an economist, maybe we may not be
okay, I think there's a little bit of an audio issue with you.
Understand.
Sir, let me just come back to you. Mr. Reddy, I'll just come back to you in a second. We'll just quickly fix your audio. But let me just take that question across to Mr. Goyal. Mr. Goyal, you heard what Jayati Ghosh was saying, and I'm not sure if Mr. Reddy was responding to that in the specific sense that I was asking the question, that you're saying that their allegation is political. But your own framing of the question itself, the way you put it, seems political. You're saying that why were they not questioning anything before 2014? Armed forces are being questioned. This sounds very much like BJP language. Was the BJP behind this letter of yours?
No, nothing like that. See, the chartered accountants.
By the way, we have never questioned the armed forces.
We are a statutory body under the Act of Parliament, and we have nothing to do with the BJP or the RSS or any other political party. But one thing is clear, that we do want that the Indian economy, which now is growing, and in comparison to 2014 or 15 or 16, we are growing in spite of the GST, in spite of the demonetization. And see, the chartered accountants are the persons who know the figures very well. I am not seeing even a single person in these 108 list. I may be wrong. Not even a single chartered accountant is there in the 108 list.
Why should there be chartered accountants? They're economists who are raising questions about economic data.
Chartered accountants are also economists.
No. But I'm saying because economists are there or chartered accountants are there.
I'm not on that.
I'm on the point of the argument that you're making. You're saying that what they have done is politically motivated. I'm saying, where is the proof that what they've done is political motivated, where if you go simply by the facts, what they're saying, the fact that the NSSO report was suppressed, or there are questions over the GDP back series data, these are all facts in the public domain. What is the political agenda here?
See, our submission is this, that this is a one-pager statement. It is not backed by any data by those 108 economists.
They've cited they've given the examples in the letter.
See, one example has been given.
We are asking for the data to be released.
Yeah, why not? See, one thing which has been
they said they are asking.
We want the NSSO report to be released.
Yeah, they're saying release the data which the government is sitting on, showing that jobs is in a bad situation. They're asking to be released. What is wrong with that? You should also ask for it to be released.
See, that's altogether different thing. But the data which has been released, the GDP growth or other things. First of all, we should discuss those things now. See, if FDI is if FDI in our country is at present is highest in the world, it is more than China. So it is quite clear there is no there can't be any second thought about it.
Let's get Dr. Pranab Sen in, and I'm also waiting on whether I can go back to Devraj Reddy. But can I just get Dr. Pranab Sen in? Dr. Pranab Sen, what do you make of this? Because I mean, you are not a signatory to this letter sent by the Economists, but do you broadly agree with the sentiment that they've expressed, the concerns over the integrity of economic data, and also what do you make of the response, not just from the chartered economists, but also from the chartered accountants, but also from Arun Jaitley, who says that these are compulsive contrarians, and I think he calls them so-called economists.
Yes, he does indeed. Let me put it to you very bluntly. You know, I think the letter overreaches a little bit, but the essential point that the letter seeks to make is that in recent days, I think there is at least not just a suspicion, I think it goes beyond mere suspicion of the political executive interfering with the data being generated by the CSO. Now, whether they have or not is not the issue. If such a perception is created, and I think that perception is fairly widespread, then people like me who have spent long years in trying to build the credibility of official statistics in India find it very worrisome. You know, the most telling feature of what has happened is the fact that whether we talk about the release of the GDP back series or about the suppression of the NSS data, employment data, the charge was led by the NITI Aayog. Had this been done by the Ministry of Statistics itself, I think the charges would have been less credible. But the involvement of NITI Aayog is reprehensible, and it casts serious doubts on the independence of official statistics in India.
Right. So, this is the point, sir, Mr. Goyal, that, and this is Dr. Pranab Sen, he is a former chief statistician of India. He is not a signatory to this letter. He is saying there is a serious problem. Why is it so hard for all of you to acknowledge that there is a problem? He is saying that, for example, the GDP data is released by the NITI Aayog, which has never happened in the past. The NITI Aayog is not responsible for releasing GDP data. The acting head of the National Statistical Commission has resigned along with his colleague, saying that there was political interference. Should this not be a matter of concern to you as a chartered accountant?
See, we are really concerned about all the happenings, and we don't know exactly what are the reasons of the resigning.
They have said, he has said in his public statement, he said because of political pressure.
But you see, NITI Aayog was never in existence earlier. Before 2014, NITI Aayog was never in existence as such.
So how is so that's all the more reason to ask, why are they releasing the GDP data if they have not been in existence before 2014?
But of course, see, ultimately the NITI Aayog is a bigger platform, a bigger agency which can very well publish the data.
Sir, that's like saying that tomorrow the Union Cabinet can release the data because it's a bigger platform. That doesn't work like that, right? Each government has its individual entities and there is a certain integrity to it. That is why our data collection was considered to be amongst the best in the world. Now, there are serious questions that are being raised over it. I come back to you. Again, if you see the language of your statement, you're saying it's not political, but it sounds very much like you have a problem with their questioning the Modi government. Is that the real problem that you have with this?
You see the timing.
Why you see?
See the timing.
The timing, I see. Elections.
Yeah, just at the edge of the election process being started, you are raising it just like the award Vapsi, and you see in the 5 years there was no concern, but all of a sudden.
Okay, let Jayati Ghosh respond to that. Jayati Ghosh, you are raising it just on the eve of elections.
Yes. No, listen, we are raising it because these issues have come to a head right now. The GDP back series discussion all starts from September, October onwards. The suppression of the NSSO employment data comes from November onwards. And in fact, there was still hope in January and in February that they would release it. And there was still, in fact, there was a meeting of the NSSO subcommittee that deals with this, that has reiterated just last week that this report is fine and it must be released. So this letter is in the face of recent events, which have first of all involved what appear to be manipulation of back series and recent data of the GDP, and what is a clear evidence of suppression of an already approved report. These have all just happened, and therefore this letter is now.
Okay. And Pranab Sen, to the other point which the chartered accountants have made in their letter, the fact that overall if you look at India's growth, it's doing so well, FDI is doing so well. So, why these constant questions on the data? Is that, do you think that's even a legitimate question?
Let me put it this way. The fact is that the Indian economy is doing all right, FDI is strong, but all of this is driven quite strongly by the fact that the data in India, the official statistics, were held in high regard. The problem that you are potentially facing is that if the data is questioned by international investors, then tomorrow they may not be willing to stick their necks out and bring their money in because they do not trust the data on which they're making their decisions. That is the danger of, meddling around with statistics.
I see. That's a big concern, actually. The fact is that if this data, you're actually saying that these economists raising these questions is going to scare off investors. Isn't the bigger worry the fact that there are serious question marks over the data? Isn't that the greater concern, which already now international agencies and international bodies are beginning to question?
Sir, I have not seen even a single international body in last 5 years questioning about the data integrity of that country. And
we've actually got Ruchir Sharma of Morgan Stanley said that now the world is starting to question India's data.
Morgan Stanley may be selling, but direct question has not come as of now. Secondly, you see in this press statement of 108 economists, it has been begun that in early 2015 the Central Statistics Office issued a new GDP series 11-12. See, earlier in 1967, then 1978 it was changed, then it was changed to 1988, then it was changed to 1999, and then it was changed to 2006. So it is a routine exercise.
No, I don't think the problem is with the fact that you're changing the base year. The problem is with the fact that when you change the base year, and then also the fact that the NITI Aayog is then releasing it. The body which has no business actually releasing GDP data.
See, NITI Aayog is the new version of the Planning Commission.
Which never released GDP data.
A lot number of things were never happened in our country, sir. There was never the surgical strike, there were never the air strike. So we should be happy to have the positive new things. We should not be scared.
No, this is why I said that I really have to think about who's really has the political agenda. Anyway, Jayati Ghosh, one second. Jayati Ghosh, you want to come in on the GDP? Yes, the back series.
I mean, I think the point about any GDP series, of course, there are constant changes, and obviously each time the numbers vary and so on. The issue of credibility has arisen simply because when you generate a new series, you typically also have a back series. Now, what has happened in this case is that, first of all, the back series was excessively delayed. Then secondly, you had an element of the National Statistical Commission bringing out one back series that was first put up and then very speedily withdrawn, and then hastily another alternative back series which presented lower growth rates for the previous government than had been suggested earlier, which is a clearly political move. That was suddenly brought in. Now, we are independent scholars who are looking to see the credibility of statistics. Then you have a further revision of the recent GDP series where suddenly the year after demonetization, which everybody acknowledges was a relatively bad economic year, suddenly produces the highest growth rate of the recent past.
Right.
Now, this kind of thing actually strains credibility. And until you get less opacity in how you're deriving these numbers, unless you get a much more transparent revelation of how exactly these numbers have been arrived at and what you're doing to get these different numbers at different times, there are bound to be questions. So what we are saying is, please establish the objectivity and credibility of our statistical system, because that is so extremely important for our economy.
All right, let's try and go back to Devraj Reddy in Hyderabad and see if this time we can get a clear line to him. Mr. Reddy, sorry, just the same question to you, that if you could explain the background to your letter, that because of the way in which you framed your letter seems to be much more as though you're peeved with the fact that the Modi government is being questioned. You used 2014 as a cutoff, saying that why were questions not being raised earlier. What was the genesis of this letter? What led you, all of you, to put this letter together as chartered accountants?
Two things. Now, India is moving very fast, international comment. By blaming the data, the foreign investors flow may reduce. See, if you take the China is also going a little bit slow in their economical growth. We are going forward. Right. In this juncture, an independent group making an allegation, it may affect. Because if there also the assumption, they are saying this because of this element, they are having doubt. where is the statistical data for them to say that this data is wrong? See, and that too, the timing also, if they take, is 100% wrong. Now, the issue is that they can release after 1 month, after some time, or before 2-3 months before they can take. Why they taken such a hasty decision? As a responsible citizen, not only as a professional, we thought this is wrong in the best interest of India. So, because if you see very far in Middle East countries,
no, but Mr. Reddy,
all are investing in India.
Mr. Reddy,
type of blaming the data, where the
Mr. Reddy,
independent agencies are not saying anything.
Mr. Reddy, can you hear me?
We are not blaming the data. We are saying, please.
Mr. Reddy, I don't know if you can hear me.
And base index has changed. Suppose if you see every 5-6 years, even income tax of the
okay, I think
changing. Here also the index has changed. It has happened from 50, 5-6 times. From 2004 and 5, now they changed it to 2010 and 11. So
no, Mr. Reddy, Mr. Reddy.
So because this
you're not allowing me to ask you a question.
Blaming data is wrong. It is a fact. Because we are not bothered which government, which is going to be there. Every government works for India. But India image should not be affected by independent people.
Okay, Mr. Reddy, I think, yeah, I think we'll try to come back to you to try and put that question to you. But overall, Dr. Sen, what do you make of now, because now looking ahead at this current situation with the data and the, the questions over the data, what does this really mean? Because again, we are now heading into elections. We don't know what government is going to come next. But what are some of the ways that we could try to repair the damage to these institutions and bodies that collect economic data?
There is only one way in which the credibility of such institutions can be maintained, and that is by the political system overtly staying away from the data generation, compilation and release process.
Right.
The people at large can question the statistical agencies about methodologies. There can be differences in opinion on that. But the political element must be kept away. Otherwise, the suspicion is constantly going to be that it's not the methodology that we are talking about.
Right.
It's really the official statistics becoming a part of the larger political PR machinery. Right. That is the thing that we must avoid at all costs.
Right.
Now, the point that was made slightly earlier, I think we need to be very clear about it. When the data was released, the new base series, 2011-12 base series in 2015, questions had been raised. The CSO answered them. It may not have satisfied people. But what has happened in these two particular instances, which is the back series and the NSS report, is that the Ministry of Statistics is silent. The ball is being carried by NITI Aayog and now by the finance minister. This should never happen.
Right.
Where is the voice of the statistical system itself? The chief statistician is not coming out and defending it.
Right.
The chairman of the National Statistical Commission has resigned. Right? So we are not hearing the statistical voice.
Right.
We are hearing only political voices. And that is going to muddy waters.
Okay. Well, let's certainly hope that whichever government comes into place will try to restore the damage that's been done to the credibility of these associations. But thank you all so much for joining us on Reality Check. That's all the time we have. Thanks for watching. Good night.